Jake had been working nights at the Space Research Center for 3 whole months now. The job wasn't glamorous, just walking around empty buildings and making sure no one broke in. But it paid well, and he needed the money. The place sat in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by nothing but desert and silence. Most nights were the same. Jake would start his shift at 11, grab his flashlight and radio, then spend the next 8 hours walking the same paths over and over. The huge metal dishes pointed at the sky looked scary in the dark, like giant ears listening for secrets from space. During the day, scientists used them to search for signals from other worlds. At night, they just stood there, cold and quiet. Jake didn't mind the quiet, though. After growing up in the city with all its noise and chaos, the desert peace felt good. He could think here. He could breathe. And the stars. Wow, the stars were incredible. Away from all the city lights, the night sky looked like someone had thrown diamonds across black velvet. On this particular Tuesday night in October, something felt different. Jake couldn't put his finger on it at first. The air seemed to hum, with electricity like right before a thunderstorm, but there wasn't a cloud in the sky. As he made his usual round past the main building, he stopped. There was a sound, soft, musical, almost like someone humming a lullaby. Jake had been doing this job long enough to know every sound the place made. The generators had their steady rumble. The computers made their quiet beeps. The wind whistled through the metal frames of the dishes. But this sound was new. It was beautiful, but sad. Like a song someone might sing when they thought no one was listening. Following the sound, Jake walked around the back of the observatory building. That's when he saw her. At first, he thought it was just another person, maybe a scientist who had stayed late. But as he got closer, his steps slowed. Something wasn't right. The woman was sitting on a large rock that overlooked the valley below. She was looking up at the stars and she was crying. But it wasn't normal crying. Her tears seemed to catch the moonlight, glowing softly as they fell. And her skin. Jake rubbed his eyes, thinking maybe he was seeing things after too. Many long nights. But no. Her skin really did have a faint glow to it, like moonlight on water. Jake stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only a few minutes. He'd never seen anyone like her. She was tall and graceful, with long arms and legs that moved like a dancer's. Her hair flowed like it was underwater, even though there was barely any wind. And when she turned to look at him, Jake's breath caught in his throat. Her eyes were huge and dark, like looking into the night sky itself. But they weren't scary. They were sad. So incredibly sad that Jake felt his own chest tighten with sympathy. She looked at him with those ancient, tired eyes, and somehow Jake knew she had been carrying pain for a very long time. The strangest part was that she didn't seem surprised to see him. She didn't jump up or try to hide. She just looked at him, tilted her head slightly, and continued her soft humming. It was like she had been waiting for someone to find her. Jake realized he was still holding his flashlight. The beam pointed at the ground between them. His radio crackled with static, making them both look at it. The sound seemed harsh and ugly compared to her gentle song. Jake quickly turned the volume down, not wanting to disturb whatever moment this was. "Are you okay?" he asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. It seemed like the wrong question, but he didn't know what else to say. She tilted her head, the other way, like a bird trying to understand a new sound. Then she spoke, and her voice was like wind chimes mixed with flowing water. But Jake couldn't understand the words. They weren't in any language he'd ever heard before. That's when it really hit him. This wasn't just someone who looked different. This was someone who was different. Everything about her, from the way she moved to the way light seemed to bend around her, told Jake that she wasn't from here. Not from this town, not from this state, maybe not even from this planet. The logical part of Jake's brain told him to call his supervisor or the police or someone, but something deeper told him to stay quiet. She wasn't hurting anyone. She was just sitting there, sad and alone, looking at the stars like she was homesick for a place he couldn't even imagine. As they sat in silence, him standing, her on the rock, Jake started to notice more details. The way her clothes seemed to shimmer and change color slightly like oil on water. How she didn't seem to feel the desert cold that was making Jake pull his jacket tighter. The way small desert animals, usually scared of people, came closer to her without fear. A coyote trotted past them, stopping to look at the strange woman before continuing on its way. Even the night insects seemed drawn to her gentle glow, circling her like tiny planets around a star. It was like nature recognized her as something special, something that belonged to the natural order even if she didn't belong to Earth. Jake found himself relaxing despite the impossibility of the situation. There was something peaceful about her presence, something that made the loneliness he'd been carrying for months feel less heavy. He'd moved to this desert job to get away from people, but now he realized how much he'd missed simple human connection, or in this case, whatever kind of connection this was. The night wore on, and still they sat together in comfortable silence. She would occasionally make soft sounds, not quite words, not quite song, and Jake found himself responding with gentle, sounds of his own. It was like they were having a conversation without language, understanding each other on some level that went deeper than words. As the first hint of dawn began to lighten the eastern horizon, she stood up. Jake watched as she looked one more time at the stars, now fading in the growing light. She turned to him, and for just a moment Jake saw something in her expression that looked almost like gratitude. Then she started to fade, not walking away, not hiding, actually becoming transparent like morning mist. Within seconds, she was gone completely, leaving Jake alone with the sunrise and the growing certainty that his life had just changed forever. Jake stood there for a long time after she disappeared, watching the sun come up over the desert. The normal sounds of day shift workers arriving began to drift across the compound, but they seemed far away and unimportant. All Jake could think about were those sad, ancient eyes, and the way her presence had made him feel less alone than he had in years. That night, as Jake prepared to start his shift, he found himself hoping she would come back. He had so many questions, but more than that, he wanted to help somehow. Whatever had made her so sad, whatever had brought her to this lonely place in the desert, Jake felt like maybe, just maybe, he was supposed to be part of her story. Jake couldn't stop thinking about what he'd seen. All day as he tried to sleep in his small apartment, her face kept appearing in his mind. Those huge, sad eyes. The way she'd looked at the stars like she was trying to find her way home. By the time evening came around, Jake was convinced he'd imagined the whole thing. Maybe the desert isolation was finally getting to him. But as he drove back to work that night, his heart was racing. Part of him hoped she wouldn't be there, so he could go back to his normal, quiet life. Another part of him desperately wanted to see her again, to prove to himself that magic was still possible in the world. The first few hours of his shift dragged by. Jake walked his usual route, but kept glancing toward the spot where he'd found her. Nothing. Just rocks and desert, plants in the endless sky. By 2 a.m, he was starting to feel foolish. Of course she wasn't real. People don't just glow in the moonlight and disappear into thin air. Then he heard it again. That soft, musical humming. His flashlight beam shook as he hurried around the building. And there she was, sitting on the same rock, looking up at the same stars. But tonight, something was different. She wasn't crying. When she saw Jake approaching, she turned toward him and made a sound that could have been a greeting. Jake couldn't help but smile. "You came back," he said softly. She tilted her head, clearly not understanding his words, but something in her expression suggested she understood his tone. Jake sat down on a smaller rock nearby, careful not to get too close. He didn't want to scare her away. For the next hour, they sat in comfortable silence. Jake found himself studying her more carefully now that the shock had worn off. Her skin really did have that soft glow, like she had starlight running through her veins instead of blood. Her clothes, if they were clothes, seemed to move and shift on their own, changing from silver to blue to purple in the moonlight. Finally, Jake decided to try something. He pointed to himself and said, "Jake." Then he pointed to her and raised his eyebrows in question. She looked confused at first, then seemed to understand. She pointed to herself and made a sound that was beautiful but impossible for Jake to repeat. It had tones and music in it that human vocal cords couldn't make. Jake tried anyway, making such a terrible attempt that she actually seemed to smile. She tried again, this time making a simpler sound. It still wasn't quite human, but Jake could almost manage it. "Luna?" he said, trying to approximate what he'd heard. She nodded, seeming pleased. Luna. It wasn't her real name, Jake knew, but it was close enough for them to use. Over the next few nights, they began to develop their own way of communicating. Jake would point to things and say the English word. Luna would repeat it back in her musical voice, then show him something from her world. The first time she shared an image with him, Jake nearly fell off his rock. One moment he was looking at her face, and the next, his mind was filled with pictures that weren't his own. He saw cities made of crystal floating in purple clouds. He saw beings like Luna moving gracefully through spaces that seemed to be built from light itself. He saw ships that looked more like living creatures than machines, swimming through space between distant stars. "Your home?" Jake whispered when the images faded. Luna's expression grew sad again, and she nodded. Then she showed him more pictures, but these were different. The crystal cities were empty now. The beautiful beings moved like sleepwalkers, their faces blank and emotionless. The spaceships sat motionless, as if they'd forgotten how to fly. Jake didn't understand what had happened to Luna's world, but he could see the pain in her eyes when she shared these images. Something terrible had gone wrong in that beautiful place, and somehow Luna had ended up here, alone on Earth. As the nights passed, Jake began to look forward to their meetings more than anything else in his life. Luna was learning English words quickly, and Jake was starting to understand some of her gestures and expressions. She was curious about everything, asking about the desert animals, the plants, even the machines in the research center. But she was especially fascinated by Jake's emotions. When he laughed at something, she would stare at his face intently, as if trying to memorize the expression. When he felt sad about something from his past, she would lean forward, watching every change in his features. "You feel," she said, one night the words coming out slowly in her musical accent. "Of course I feel," Jake replied. "Don't you?" Luna was quiet for a long time. Then she touched her chest where her heart would be. "I remember feeling. Long time ago." That night, Jake began to understand that Luna wasn't just visiting Earth. She was hiding here, and whatever she was hiding from, it had something to do with feelings, with the ability to feel joy and sadness and all the messy, complicated emotions that made life worth living. 3 weeks had passed since Jake first found Luna crying under the stars. What had started as the strangest encounter of his life had become the most important part of every day. Jake would count the hours until sunset, when he could head to work and spend his nights learning about the woman from the stars. Luna's English was getting better every day, though she still spoke in a way that was half music, half words. She could tell Jake simple things now, that she was hungry, that she thought the desert was beautiful, that she missed her home. But there were deeper things she struggled to explain, and Jake could see the frustration in her eyes when words failed her. Tonight was different, though. Luna seemed more relaxed, more willing to share. They'd developed a routine where Jake would bring a thermos of coffee and some snacks, and Luna would show him images from her world while they shared. The simple human ritual of eating together. "Jake," she said, settling onto her usual rock. "I want show you truth." Jake felt his stomach flutter with nervous excitement. Over the weeks, he'd pieced together bits and pieces of Luna's story, but he sensed there were important things she hadn't told him yet. Luna closed her eyes and placed her hand on Jake's forehead. Suddenly, his mind was flooded with images more vivid and detailed than anything she'd shared before. He saw Luna's world as it had been long ago, a paradise beyond imagination. The crystal cities weren't just beautiful, they were alive, growing and changing like living organisms. The people moved with purpose and joy, their faces bright with emotion and creativity. Children played games that involved reshaping light itself. Artists created sculptures from pure energy that sang and danced in the air. But then the images changed. Jake watched as Luna's people discovered new technologies, new ways of thinking that promised to make them better, smarter, more perfect. Slowly, generation by generation, they began to change. The messy, unpredictable emotions that had once fueled their art and love and laughter started to seem primitive, inefficient. Jake saw scientists and leaders arguing that feelings were holding them back, that a truly advanced civilization should be based on pure logic and efficiency. One by one, Luna's people began to undergo procedures that would remove their capacity for emotion, leaving only cold intelligence behind. They said it was evolution, Luna whispered, her hand still on Jake's forehead. They said feelings were primitive, weak, that we would be better without them. In the images, Jake watched as the crystal cities grew darker and colder. The living buildings became static and lifeless. The people moved like robots, efficient but empty. Art and music and laughter disappeared, replaced by perfect order and endless silence. Luna had been their queen, the last one to resist the change. She had ruled over a people who were slowly forgetting how to feel anything at all. And finally, she had been forced to make an impossible choice. They wanted to fix me too, Luna said, and Jake could hear tears in her voice, even though her hand was still showing him images. Said I was sick, broken, that a proper ruler should not cry or laugh or feel afraid. Jake saw Luna's escape, a desperate flight through space in a small ship, leaving behind everything she had ever known. She had come to Earth because it was far enough away that her people might not find her, and because human emotions were so strong and vibrant that being around them helped her remember what it felt like to be truly alive. When Luna removed her hand, Jake was crying. Not just for her, but for the entire civilization that had chosen efficiency over joy, perfection over love. That's why you were crying that first night, Jake said quietly. You weren't just sad. You were grieving. Luna nodded. I grieve for my people. They are all still alive, but they are not living. They have forgotten how to love, how to hope, how to dream. They are like beautiful statues now, perfect, but empty. Jake reached out carefully and took Luna's hand. Her skin was warm despite its ethereal glow, and her fingers intertwined with his as naturally as if they'd been holding hands for years. You don't have to go back, Jake said. You can stay here. Earth isn't perfect, but at least we're still allowed to feel things. Luna squeezed his hand gently. I want to stay, she whispered. But Jake, they are looking for me. They think I am sick, and they want to bring me home to cure me, to make me like them. A chill ran down Jake's spine. How long do we have? Luna looked up at the stars, her expression troubled. I do not know. But they are coming. I can feel them getting closer every day. Jake looked at this amazing woman who had trusted him with her deepest secrets, who had shown him wonders beyond imagination, who had brought magic and meaning into his quiet life. The thought of losing her to the cold efficiency of her people made his chest ache with a pain he'd never experienced before. Then we'll figure something out, Jake said firmly. I don't know how yet, but we'll find a way to keep you safe. Luna smiled at him, the first truly happy expression he'd seen on her face. You would do that? For me? Luna, Jake said, surprised by the certainty in his own voice. I'd do anything for you. As they sat together under the desert stars, holding hands and planning for an uncertain future, Jake realized that his quiet life as a night security guard had become the most important story he could ever imagine. Whatever happened next, he wasn't going to let Luna face it alone. 2 months had passed since Luna first shared her story with Jake. Winter was settling over the desert, bringing cold nights and clear skies that seemed to stretch forever. Jake had never been happier in his life, despite knowing that danger was coming closer every day. Luna had become part of his world in ways he never expected. She had learned to appear human during the day, using some kind of technology Jake didn't understand but didn't question. She would visit him at his apartment, marveling at simple things like television, running water, and the taste of pizza. She was like a child discovering the world, except this child had lived for centuries and ruled over an advanced civilization. But it was during their nights together at the research station that Jake saw the real Luna. There, under the stars, where they'd first met, she could drop her human disguise and be herself. Her skin would glow softly in the darkness, and she would tell Jake stories of her world that made him laugh and cry in equal measure. She taught him about her people's history, how they had once been explorers and dreamers, spreading across the galaxy not to conquer, but to learn and share. She showed him images of festivals that lasted for weeks, where entire cities would be transformed into works of art. She described music that could change the weather and poetry that could heal broken hearts. We were so alive then, Luna would say, her voice filled with longing. Every day was an adventure, every person was an artist in their own way. We celebrated everything, births, seasons, even failures, because they taught us something new. Jake tried to imagine what it would be like to lose all of that, to watch your entire species choose emptiness over joy. How did it happen so fast? He asked one night. Luna was quiet for a long time. It did not feel fast to us, she finally said. Each generation the changes seemed small. Parents who showed less emotion to their children, thinking it would make them stronger. Schools that taught logic was more important than creativity. Leaders who said that feelings got in the way of making good decisions. She showed Jake images of the transformation, how the vibrant festivals gradually became formal ceremonies, how art became standardized and efficient, how children stopped playing and started studying algorithms before they could walk. The worst part, Luna whispered, was that each step seemed reasonable. Who wouldn't want to be smarter? Who wouldn't want to make better decisions? Who wouldn't want to eliminate pain and sadness from their lives? But you can't have joy without sadness, Jake said. They're connected. You taught me that. Luna smiled at him with such warmth that Jake felt his heart skip. Over the weeks, he had fallen completely in love with her, though he hadn't found the courage to say it out loud. How do you tell someone from another world that you love them? How do you promise forever to someone whose people are hunting her? That is what I tried to tell them, Luna said. I was the last ruler who still understood this. I fought the council of logic for decades, trying to preserve some space for emotion in our society. But eventually, even my closest advisors began to see me as a problem to be solved. She showed Jake the final confrontation, a cold clinical meeting where beings who had once been her friends and family sat around a crystal table and voted to have her corrected. They spoke about her as if she were broken, as if her ability to feel love and fear and wonder was a disease that needed to be cured. They said I could rule more effectively without emotions clouding my judgment, Luna continued. They promised it wouldn't hurt, that I would still be me, just better, improved. Jake squeezed her hand tighter. But you ran. I ran, Luna confirmed. Like a coward, I abandoned my people and fled to the stars. I left them to their perfect empty existence because I was too afraid to let them take away the last thing that made me feel alive. That doesn't make you a coward, Jake said firmly. That makes you brave. You saved the most important part of yourself. Luna looked at him with those incredible eyes, and Jake saw something there that made his breath catch. It was love, not the grateful affection she'd shown him before, but real, deep, complicated love, the kind that scared you and thrilled you at the same time. Jake, she said softly, there is something else I must tell you. The hunters. They are very close now. I can feel them in the space around your planet. They will be here soon. Jake's blood went cold. They'd known this day would come, but somehow he'd started to hope they had more time. How soon? Days, maybe a week. Luna's voice was steady, but Jake could see the fear in her eyes. When they come, they will take me back. They will fix what they see as broken in me. And Jake, the person you love, will stop existing. I will look the same, but everything that makes me who I am will be gone. Jake stood up suddenly, pacing back and forth on the rocky ground. No, we're not giving up. There has to be something we can do. What can we do against an entire civilization? That has mastered space travel and genetic engineering? Luna asked sadly. They are more advanced than anything your world has ever seen. But they're missing something, Jake said, his mind racing. You said it yourself. They've forgotten how to be creative, how to think outside the box. Maybe that's their weakness. Luna looked at him with growing hope. What do you mean? Jake sat back down and took her hands in both of his. I mean, maybe they've become so logical and predictable that they can't imagine someone like you would have a backup plan. Maybe they can't imagine that a primitive human would be willing to help you. You want to fight them? I want to save. You, Jake said. And maybe there's a way to save your people too. You said you were their queen. That means part of you still is their queen, right? Even in exile? Luna nodded slowly. In theory, yes, but Jake, even if we could somehow overcome their technology, even if we could find a way to restore emotions to my people, it would mean what? Luna's voice was barely a whisper. It would mean I would have to go back. I would have to leave Earth, leave you. The words hit Jake like a physical blow, but as he looked at Luna's face, saw the hope and terror and love all mixed together in her expression, he knew what he had to do. Then we'll make that choice when we come to it, Jake said. But first we save you. We save your people. And we show the universe that feelings aren't a weakness. They're the strongest force in existence. Luna threw her arms around Jake's neck, and for the first time since he'd known her, she cried tears of joy instead of sadness. They held each other under the desert stars, knowing that in a few days, everything would change forever. The ships came on a Thursday night, appearing in the sky like falling stars that suddenly stopped and hovered. Jake was ready for them. He and Luna had spent the last week preparing, though their plan was so crazy that Jake wasn't sure it would work until the very last moment. From his position behind the research station's main building, Jake watched 3 vessels descend from the darkness. They were beautiful in a terrifying way, smooth and organic-looking like living creatures made of liquid metal. They landed silently in the desert about 100 yards from where Luna waited on her rock. Jake's heart was pounding so hard, he was sure the aliens would hear it. Everything depended on the next few minutes going exactly as planned. The beings that emerged from the ships looked exactly like Luna, except for their eyes. Where Luna's eyes held depth and warmth and life, theirs were flat and empty. They moved with mechanical precision, arranging themselves in a perfect formation as they approached her. Luna stood up as they got closer, and Jake could see her shoulders straighten with the dignity of a true queen. Even facing the end of everything she held herself like royalty. Luna, 7 stars dancing, the leader said in that same musical voice Luna used, but without any of the emotion that made her speech beautiful. You will return with us for correction. I know why you've come, Luna replied, her voice carrying across the desert air. But I have a question for you first. Do you remember what it felt like to discover something new? To be surprised by beauty? To laugh until your sides hurt? The hunters looked at each other with mild confusion. These are inefficient processes that serve no logical purpose, one of them replied. You will be freed from such distractions. Luna nodded as if she'd expected that answer. And do you remember the last time you created something just because it made you happy? When did you last write a poem or compose a song or paint a picture? Artistic expression has been optimized and standardized for maximum efficiency, the leader said. Individual creativity is unnecessary in an advanced society. I see, Luna said quietly. Then she raised her voice, speaking not just to the hunters but to Jake, who was recording everything on his phone from his hiding spot. Then let me show you what you've lost. Luna closed her eyes and began to sing. It wasn't the sad, lonely song Jake had heard that first night, or the gentle humming she did when she was content. This was something else entirely. A song that seemed to pull music from the air itself, that made the desert sand dance and the stars shine brighter. But more than that, Luna was sharing emotions through the song. Jake felt it hit him like a wave. Pure joy, the kind a child feels on Christmas morning. Then came love, deep and warm and all-encompassing. Then came the bittersweet beauty of autumn leaves falling and the fierce protectiveness of a parent watching over a sleeping child. The hunters stopped moving. For the first time since they'd arrived, they looked uncertain. One of them, actually, stumbled backward as if the emotions were a physical force pushing against him. "Stop," the leader commanded, but his voice wasn't as steady as before. Luna opened her eyes and smiled. "Do you feel that?" she asked. "That confusion, that stirring, in your chest, that's what you threw away, that's what you decided wasn't worth keeping. We are experiencing technical difficulties," one of the hunters said, pressing a hand to his chest. "There appears to be a malfunction in our emotional suppression systems." "It's not a malfunction," Luna said gently. "It's remembering. The emotions are still there, buried under all that logic and efficiency. I can wake them up because I never let mine die." Jake watched in amazement as the hunters began to change. Their perfect formation fell apart as they stumbled around, overwhelmed by feelings they hadn't experienced in centuries. One of them fell to his knees, staring at the star-filled sky as if seeing it for the first time. Another was crying, though Jake was sure he didn't understand why. "This is wrong," the leader said. But he was crying too, tears streaming down his glowing cheeks. We were better than this." "Were you?" Luna asked. "Were you better when you could look at a sunset and feel nothing? Were you better when you could hold a child and feel no love? Were you better when you created nothing beautiful because beauty didn't serve a purpose?" The leader looked around, at his fellow hunters, all of them in various states of emotional chaos, and something cracked in his expression. I remember music," he whispered. "I remember making music that no one else had ever heard before. I remember being proud of it." "What happened to that musician?" Luna asked softly. I was told he was inefficient, unnecessary, so he was removed." The leader's voice broke completely. "What have we done? What have we done to ourselves?" Luna walked over to him and gently placed her hand on his shoulder. "You lost your way," she said, "but you can find it again. All of you can." Jake stepped out from his hiding place, still filming. This was the most important part of their plan, documenting everything so that if Luna had to leave Earth, she'd have proof that her people could be saved. "You're not broken," Jake called out to the hunters. "Feeling things doesn't make you weak or inefficient. It makes you alive. It makes you who you're supposed to be." The hunters looked at Jake with wonder, as if they'd never seen a human before. In a way, Jake realized they probably hadn't. They'd only seen other logical beings like themselves. "This primitive creature speaks truth," one of the hunters said in amazement. "How is that possible?" "Because primitive creatures like me never forgot that love and joy and even sadness are what make life worth living," Jake replied. "We never tried to become perfect. We stayed human." Luna looked back and forth between Jake and her people, and Jake could see her making a decision that would change everything. "I'm going back with them," she announced, and Jake's heart nearly stopped. "But not to be corrected. I'm going back to help them remember who they used to be. I'm going back to teach them how to feel again." "Luna, no," Jake started, but she held up her hand. "This is what I was meant to do," she said, her voice firm but kind. "I was their queen. I ran away when they needed me most, but I won't make that mistake again. They need someone to show them the way back to themselves." The leader looked up at Luna with something Jake was amazed to recognize as hope. "You would help us? After what we came here to do to you?" "I would help you because of what you came here to do to me," Luna replied. "You came here because you're lost and afraid. Even if you don't understand, that's what you're feeling. You came here because some part of you knows something is missing." Jake felt tears running down his cheeks as he watched Luna transform back into the queen she'd always been. She wasn't just the sad, exiled woman he'd fallen in love with. She was a leader who was about to save her entire civilization. "But Luna," Jake said quietly, What about us? Luna walked over to Jake and took his hands one last time. You gave me something I thought I'd lost forever, she said. You reminded me that love is worth fighting for, worth risking everything for. You helped me remember who I am. She pressed something into Jake's palm, a small crystal-like device that pulsed with soft light. This will let you contact me, she said. And Jake, my people will need teachers, humans who remember how to feel, how to create, how to love. Would you consider making a trip to the stars? Jake looked at the device, then at Luna, then at the group of former hunters who were still discovering emotions like children learning to walk. Are you asking me to help you rebuild an entire civilization? Luna smiled, and Jake saw not just the woman he loved, but the queen she'd always been. I'm asking you to help me bring joy back to the universe. Jake pulled Luna into his arms and kissed her under the desert stars, not caring that her people were watching. When they separated, he pressed his forehead against hers and whispered, "When do we leave?" Above them, the stars seemed to shine, a little brighter, as if the universe itself was celebrating the return of hope to a people who had almost forgotten how to dream. The ships that had come to Earth as hunters left as something else entirely, as the beginning of the greatest healing the galaxy had ever seen. And in the years that followed, when other civilizations found themselves losing their way in the pursuit of perfection, they would hear stories of the alien queen who remembered how to cry, and the human who reminded her that tears could be the first step toward joy.